Sergeant Henry Albert Wheeler, Australian Army, World War II. Oh folks, I've got a special treat for you here. My only story from Australia. Henry served in the Australian Army in World War II. Interviewed him and his wife Rachel here where I live in Colorado 15 years ago. Henry was 90. He lived to be 100 to 2020. He passed away November 27th. His wife made it to 99, 2019. They were married 75 years. Incredible. They were married in 1944. I don't think I've known anybody that was married as long as they were, but what a story Henry's going to tell. I love his accent. I met him and we became friends, a Jewish fella. His wife actually served as a corporal in the Israeli army in World War II. She tells her story too. I'll be sharing that on this channel here soon. Henry was born in 1920. He grew up in an orphanage, became an Australian cowboy. When he moved to Grand Junction, he had a peach orchard for 26 years. So he loved the outdoors and the country and just did so many things with his life. I'm just so impressed with his story as I've heard it again. It's just powerful. He served with the famed 24th Australian Infantry Battalion. Henry's division fought 4 enemies of the king in World War II. He was proud of that fact. No other division did that. They fought the Italians in North Africa, the Germans in Greece, the Vichy French in Syria and Lebanon, and the Japanese. Oh my gosh, incredible. He was a platoon sergeant, folks, in combat. He wrote a book about his experience in World War II. I think he really held back in this interview. He could have shared a lot more, but like I said, I'm not after the blood and guts of war. But Henry told a great story, and I'm so happy to share it with you here today on my YouTube channel and on my Voices of History radio channel also. So he received 10 service medals for his time during the military. And as you can see, he's very proud that he served in the Australian Army. My only story from World War II from the Australian Army. Like I said, Henry and Rachel are gone now, but their story will live on through this channel. I want to thank Rita Schultz and I want to thank SK Ofstad. You two have been helping support my work, and I'm just so grateful for both of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for helping me to continue my work, seeing the vision that I have, and make these stories possible. Like I said, I don't monetize these videos. I don't want to interrupt these stories of these veterans. And so thank you, Rita. Thank you, SK. God bless you guys. Love you both. Okay. Folks, thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. I'd like to get 100,000 subscribers this year. That's my goal. Alvin, help me. Help me, brother. And he's been encouraging me to get that. And just thank you for sharing these stories and this honoring our veterans. An act of remembrance is an act of honor. So that's why this station exists, this YouTube channel exists to do just that. So thank you again. God bless you. And this is Honor Henry Albert Wheeler, Sergeant Wheeler, Australian Army, World War II. And I'll see you in my next broadcast. Recording right onto the hard drive of my computer here, so this is good. Tell me again, you're 90 years old? When, in September?
September 19, yeah.
Wow. Did you ever think you'd be 90 years old?
Well, I don't know.
How does that happen?
I don't know. Well, keeping active. I think that's probably what it is. Keeping active and having something to look forward to, because we travel a lot.
And the secret of 65 years of marriage is?
Yeah,
What's the secret of that?
The secret?
Is there a secret?
Being nice to each other.
Taking care of each other. That's the main thing.
And you obviously found the right person.
We found the right people, yeah.
What year did you join? Now, were you in the Australian Army? Or what?
Yes, I was with the Australian. Actually, I was with the militia 12 months before the war. I joined when I was 18. And I'd already had 12 months training prior to the war. Of course, when the war broke out, I volunteered. All Australian troops were volunteers. We put together 4 divisions, and every one of them were volunteers. No man that went overseas with the AIF was a conscript. They were all volunteers. The volunteers were the young 18-year-olds that went into the militia, and they were doing kind of home duties.
What year did you go in?
1939, when war broke out.
Now you're trained over in Australia?
I was already trained 12 months before, and I had no rank because I was just a private when I went in, but because of my previous military training, they made me a corporal. And we were putting our battalions together and putting our division together, and so they were utilizing the non-coms to train the new recruits that are coming in. So it was only a matter of about a month, and they made me an acting sergeant. Finally, I got my sergeant's rank, and I became a platoon sergeant. Well, after we'd got our battalion together, which was the 2nd 4th Battalion, I was the platoon. When we got our platoon officer, then I was the platoon sergeant. And we got a real nice bunch of guys together, trained together, and I trained with them all the time. I'd never put them through nothing I wouldn't do myself.
So what kind of weapon do you carry?
Well, at that time we were using pre-war weapons. It was the 303 Lee Enfield rifle and the Bren gun, which was actually, the Bren gun was the light machine gun, and of course the heavy machine guns we were using was the Vickers, which was all pre-war stuff. And it wasn't until we went overseas that they discarded most of that. We still carried the 303 Lee Enfield, but we were issued with Thompson submachine guns. And I was sent away to the PRTD, which is the Palestine Recruit Training Depot, because we went to Palestine. And we were training in all the latest weapons, and so we could come back and train our own guys.
So now, okay, in my mind, Australia, and then you said you went overseas. So where's overseas for you? Where do you go? Where did you go?
We left at the end of December 1939, and we arrived in Palestine. We came into the Suez Canal, and we came with because there was a British mandate then, and we more or less came under British control until our full division came. But we were the advanced group that went, the 19th Brigade, 16th and 19th Brigades. And then finally the full division, 6th Division, we belonged to the 6th Division. We finally grouped together, and then we became our own composite unit. And the purpose was we were to train in Palestine prior to going to Europe. Now remember, Italy was not in the war at that particular time. But in May 1940, Italy declared war. Well, because she had, I think it was 6 or 7 divisions of troops in Libya, then they maintained the Australian troops in there for the defense of the Suez Canal. And then eventually to drive them out of Libya, which was in the latter part of 1940. We had finished all our desert training and brought it all up to strength, and we went to Libya. And actually, we went into Egypt first, and right after the British had started fighting against the Italians at Sidi Barrani, they defeated the Italians at Sidi Barrani, which is inside the Egyptian border. Well, then my division, 6th Division, took over from there. And we went through and we defeated the whole Italian army all the way to Benghazi. And after Benghazi, we came back to Tobruk. Tobruk was a big battle. And as a matter of fact, my platoon was the first platoon in Tobruk on the attack, because we were the advanced party. And but we came back to the Brooklyn garrison there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we were relieved and went back to Egypt, where we were re-equipped because we were going to Greece. This was a kind of a, to me it was a mistake, because they sent us into Greece. We had nothing, no real support, very little air support, and very little heavy artillery. But they sent us in, the 6th Division, and there was New Zealand troops went in also. This was the first time that the Anzac Corps got together. Well, it was different fighting altogether, because we'd come out of the desert and we went into snow. And we moved up to the Yugoslav border, and we consolidated just below the Yugoslav border. German spotting planes were coming over and finding our positions and kind of giving us a little bit of problems. But there was no infantry fighting at that particular time. It was mostly aerial bombardment and heavy artillery. Well, I was sent out one evening to try and contact, on a reconnaissance patrol, to try and contact the advance units of the German army. I'd had a lot of experience with patrols in the desert. This is why I was a very good friend of our colonel, because my reports when I come back from my reconnaissances, usually about 90-95% correct. And after I'd visited with our intelligence section and given all the map references, etc., well, my colonel was always sitting there. He'd always call me aside. He'd say, "Come on, Sarge, now tell me the way it is," you know. But anyway, I was sent in this night with 3 other guys. Actually, they were all volunteers. I always ask my men for volunteers, whoever wants to go out on patrol, whether it's a fighting patrol or whether it's a reconnaissance patrol. Well, I found them all right. But on my way back, the topographical features of the land was, they were in mountainous country in Yugoslavia, and we were in a range of mountains in Greece, and there was kind of a valley all the way through there. Well, by the time I was coming back to try to get back the Germans already moved in overnight and moved into that valley, so I was completely cut off. We spent 6 days behind the German lines and traveling at nighttime. Wouldn't dare to travel during the daytime. The only food we had was, we always carried an emergency chocolate bar in our tunic pockets, inside pocket. That's all we had. But we were fortunate to meet up with Greek shepherds who helped us quite a lot. We finally got into Larissa one night. Larissa is like in the center of Greece. And we saw tank movements there. Well, we skirted into the town to find out who they were. Well, it happened to be German. So we got out of there fast. But we got into an area where there was a artillery barrage. And we were caught in no man's land right in between. Well, as it happened, we must have got a drop short, because we had one land right near us and blew me up. I was knocked unconscious. I didn't know nothing. The next thing I knew, when I woke up, I was in the back of an ambulance. New Zealand patrol had come out and found us and took us in. So I ended up in the Athens hospital. I had frostbitten feet. We all had very frostbitten feet because we've been in snow most of the time. And so I was getting treatment for my frostbitten feet, plus other things. They declared Athens an open city, which meant that all troops would evacuate, and they'd leave the city open so there'd be no bombardment of the city to destroy the antiquities that were there. So when we found, my buddy and I, when we realized, well, we're going to get caught here because the hospital remained there. We're getting out of here. So we did. I put on went down to the Q store and oversized boots and a couple of pairs of socks on, picked up a Tommy gun with weapons, and we headed south because we knew the evacuation was going because the Germans hit us with about 3 or 4 Panzer divisions. We had nothing to stop them. And so finally we got down to the Crete Canal. And we were very fortunate. We got there just before they blew the pontoon bridges. And most of the Australians had already been evacuated. And when I got across the other side of the Crete Canal, I met up with a New Zealand colonel. And we kind of got all the stragglers together and formed a composite unit. And civilians were feeding us. And the Germans dropped paratroopers south of us. And then he dropped leaflets on us to surrender, which we told him, well, you know, we didn't surrender. Gave him That night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, we had our backs to the Crete Canal. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, here comes this little corvette, an Australian corvette, HMAS Swan, came up the canal, and I can hear that captain today. He, on his megaphone, he says, "Anybody that can swim, you've got 1 hour." Of course, some guys couldn't swim, so they were left behind. And but those that could make it, we made it. They had the old rope ladders over the side. We clambered up those. The guys grabbed us. Well, sure enough, after an hour, he turned around and he got out of there. And we got into the bay, and they transferred us to the HMAS Hotspur, which was a British destroyer, still dark. So once we were all transferred over, the destroyer took off, trying to beat the daylight because we knew the German Stuka bombers were going to come over the next day or early in the morning, and sure enough they did. Well, my mate and I, we were on the back of the stern of the boat, and I said, "Come on," I said, "let's move up forward. I don't like it back here." Well, sure enough, right after we'd moved up forward, a 500-pounder hit the stern of the boat, and we had to hit the water because it went down fast. I don't know how long, but it seemed like hours and hours and hours that we were in the water struggling. We were, hanging on to flotations, some that had come overboard, and a lot of guys didn't have when we went down. But who came and rescued us? The little corvette that picked us up originally, and they picked us up as fast as they could, and they continued on down to Crete. And when we got to Crete, well, I met up with the remnants of my battalion. And we were in Suda Bay for probably 4 or 5 days, and then the Navy transferred my battalion up to Heraklion, which is the capital of Crete. It's further up on the coastline. And we were to defend the small airport and defend the city. We got up there, we met up with the Black Watch. There was a Black Watch unit there, and another English unit there. But anyway, we had my battalion we formed a perimeter around the airport and took up a defensive position because there was always talks about paratroopers coming. And sure enough, he used to come over every day, bomb us every day. Every day he would come over. Any movements or any place where he thought there was troops, he would bomb us. And of course, I lost my platoon commander, and I had the platoon. I used to go back to battalion headquarters first thing in the morning. We didn't have radios. We had no communication. The only communication over was field telephone, if you were lucky to get one. Well, he continued to bomb and bomb and bomb us, and we knew that day after day, and we knew that something was happening. Well, sure enough, he came over. He must have been over with probably about 700 or 800 different types of planes, bombers, that one morning. And then everything went quiet, and then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you could hear this low drone, and you look out across the sea, and you could see the Junkers coming in. Well, they came in, and they just dropped all over us. We had one particular field that had dry oats or wheat. And the only tanks, we had 2 tanks. We had nothing to, no diesel or nothing to. So they were kind of dug in. They had Vickers guns set up on top of them. Well, we knew that this was a logical place where the paratroopers were going to land, because most of the other terrain was rocky mountains, olive groves, and what have you. Sure enough, he landed there, and that's where most of the troops that landed there, well, that's when we kind of annihilated them. Well, we had to take up certain positions then. I realized that he'd lost a lot of men, but with the few that did escape, they had contact with their mainland, so they started dropping out beyond. Well, we had a lot of fights there, a lot of battles going out on patrol, and I used to go out on a lot of reconnaissance patrols and at night time mostly. Then my platoon was sent up to occupy a certain hill called Apex Hill. We get up to the Apex Hill and dig in there because it was the only place where there was the greatest observation of the area. I had a signal man with us that used to use Morse code or use the lamp. And anyway, the Germans dropped all around us. So we were kind of cut off, but we organized a bayonet charge and we got out of there. I only had 2 guys wounded and got out of there and met up with the Black Watch unit. They were giving us support till we got back to our unit. I could go on and on and on and tell you.
Let me stop you for a second here. Combat. I mean, you were in a lot of combat.
Oh, yes.
How would you define combat?
Very scary.
At the time or afterwards?
At the time, prior to going into. The first time that we went into combat was in the desert, Badia. Badia was the first garrison of the Italians. I mean, it was well fortified because they'd had many years to dig in and make concrete pillboxes and all kinds of things. We didn't go in on the first day. The 16th Brigade went in on the first day, but we went in, we hurdled them the second day and went in and mopped up the rest of them. But that time we were scared. I mean, going in, you don't know what you're going into. But with all the combat that I went into, now Tobruk was a hard shell to knock. And like I said, my platoon, my company was forward. And so my platoon was the most forward, and we followed the tanks into Tobruk after the second day. We took something like over 200,000 prisoners there. And then we had another battle in Derna, which is further along the coast. There was a big wadi there where they would dug in on one side, we were on the other. So trying to get down through that wadi, which is like a big canyon, to get up on the other side. Big escarpments we had to climb, fight our way up. That was another, because you never know. But other than that, no. Of course, when we met up with the Germans, that was something different, because they used different tactics to what the Italians used.
But I mean, is combat? I mean, do you go through like
Well,
baptism of fire where you feel invincible and then the bullets start flying?
well, yeah, when they start whistling around you, well, then you really start to. I don't know. The adrenaline gets you, and you've got all your mates near you. You know that you're going to take care of each other. This is what it's.
Well, okay, I realize I've talked to over 800 veterans in 8 years now, and I've heard so many stories. Yours is very unique, obviously, being Australian, but
Yeah.
How did Australian get involved in the war? Did you guys declare war?
Well, she was part of the British Empire.
Okay, but you didn't declare war as a country, right?
She declared war. She declared war at the same time as Britain declared war.
Okay. But you were, did you
It was
just,
a very different kind of war then. Today, mostly you're bombing from the air. How many planes was there then?
yeah.
I don't know.
Planes.
Well, you were a sergeant, did you say?
I was a sergeant, but also, Larry, I went to many schools. I went to officers training. I went to various tactical schools where I came back. Highly recommended to go to officers training school. Every time I was offered probably half a dozen times. I probably, if I had taken the first one, I probably could have gone up and up and up. But I was different. I had a bunch of guys that I'd trained. We were like one solid unit, and they were a hell of a good bunch of guys. And if I had gone to an officers training school, I would not come back to my unit. Now, there were times when there was field promotions, but there was a corps orders came out from Corps headquarters, no more field promotions because they had such a backlog of officers. They had so many officers waiting to be placed out. When we came out of Greece, well, we evacuated. That's the story. Continue from Crete. We lost quite a few guys on Crete, and we lost quite a few guys on the way from Crete back to Alexandria in Egypt. So when we got back to Palestine eventually, we were down to less than half strength. We had one full company. We had D Company completely cut off at the passes in Greece, and they were all taken prisoner.
Well, did you lose men that you knew? Obviously, I mean, how do you,
Oh God, yes.
I mean, how do you get through all that? I mean,
It hits you, but especially when you see them get hit.
are those memories you just don't think about anymore?
Yeah, I still think, when we have our reunions back in Australia, there's only a few. I think there's only about 8 or 10 of us originals left. But of course we have others, that have come on, reinforcements that have been building up and building up each time.
But they're not the same people that went.
No, they're not the same. When we came back to Palestine, we regrouped. We spent about 2 months, I guess, after the campaigns there. And we had another division, the 9th Division Australians, that went to England, but they brought them back into the Middle East, and they fought against Rommel. They were the ones that went in at the time, El Alamein. You probably never.
Second push in Africa.
So we had 3 divisions in the Middle East. We had the 6th, 7th, and 9th Division. The 8th Division went to Singapore, and they were completely cut off. I mean, it was stupid British, the British tactics. But when we came back to Palestine and regrouped, I got new officers. I had to train him. He was like a boy. I had to train him. And but I refused it every time I was offered it because I did not want to leave my guys, because we were, you know, your sergeant, you live with you, and it's not like an officer. An officer, he comes and he does his job during the day, but he's gone. But being a sergeant, you live with guys 24 hours a day. You know all their problems. You know if they want you to write a letter to their girlfriend or their mother, you do it for them. You do all the little things for them. Besides take care of them, but then put them through all the tactics and all the training too. So a sergeant had more responsibilities than an officer, believe me. And so we regrouped and retrained. I had to train them all again, all the reinforcements would come. And then we moved into Syria and Lebanon, fought the Vichy French. And we were stationed up in Baalbek. We were digging fortifications because of the Germans' possibility coming down through Turkey, forming a pincer movement to take the canal. So we built all these defenses in Lebanon and Syria. But then the Japanese, of course, in that period of time, the Japanese came into war, and they were already bombing northern Australia, so the government recalled all of us back. So we came back. We had a week's leave at home, and we were up in the north doing jungle training. And then from there, we went into New Guinea and Borneo.
So you had a lot of combat.
Well, 6 years. I had about 5 years and 10 months overseas service, and all combat. I was
Started when he was 19, so all the young years.
So, how did that change you as a person?
Well, Larry, if you knew my history prior to the war, you know I was a man before I was a boy. Let's put it this way. I was out doing a man's work when I was 14 years of age, during the Depression years. So I think that stood me well, and during my Army career.
So how do you get through the hard times, Henry? Is it your faith, your training? How do you get through the hard times of combat and battle and death and all that?
Tell him what the Australians were thinking when they went to war. Join the army and see the world.
Yeah. But no, it's difficult, and it hits more when you go to our reunions and you meet up with all your old mates, But it's there, it's here all the time.
I have to tell him this. Every time we go to a reunion and they get together, it's war talk as if it happened just yesterday. They don't think that it's 50 and 60 years since then. They're talking like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
No, it's very difficult, Larry, to try to give him my true feelings about, because I've seen so much, and at first it really hits hard, but when you see so much of it, it kind of.
Well, do you suffer with post-traumatic stress?
Huh?
Do you suffer with
I
post-traumatic
don't.
stress?
No, I didn't. I don't suffer nothing like that.
But you know what? At night when he is asleep, he doesn't know it. He doesn't feel it. He goes like this in bed, like this. Every now and then he'd go like this, so I have to touch him hard, and then it stops. And he doesn't know. It's probably from the war.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but not many that have been in combat as long as you were. Again, Henry, what were you fighting for? I know that sounds kind of. Americans are supposed to fight for God and country and the flag, but when you're in combat, it's a survival, right? You're trying to survive.
Exactly, it's a survival, and we trained. When we trained to take care of each other. You always look out for your buddy. Always, watch out for your buddy on either side. I've had guys. I've had a guy. He when we were on the border at Florina, up in the northern part of Greece. I had a young guy. He was a young guy that joined us pretty soon before we came. Before we went into. He joined the unit after we came back from the desert. He did not go in the desert. And he kind of panicked when the Germans started lobbing those shells at us, and they were close, believe me, because he had those spotting planes over all the time. And he panicked. He jumped out of his hole, and anyway, he got hit. And he got hit, and he got hit just outside my hole, and he fell in my hole. Well, half his guts was out. These are the things that make you shudder. We were in a terrible situation there. We should have never gone. It was Churchill's idea of sending us up because I think it was, something to do with royalty. The royalty was kind of into marriage or something there or whatever it was. And so we went in there with not the right equipment. We hardly ever saw a plane, well, one of our planes. And
Tell me about Gallipoli, when we went to Gallipoli. What a mistake that one was. They made so many mistakes during.
well, I did a trip to Turkey with a group, and the reason I took it because it was going to include Gallipoli. You know of Gallipoli, the Anzacs at Gallipoli. Well, being a bit of a tactician myself, because I went to tactical school during my period of time in the Army. And, you learn all types of things there, the best way for an attack and whatever, the best positions to take. When I saw what the Australians had to do on Gallipoli, the beach was probably only about 30 or 40 feet wide. And then there's sheer cliffs. Johnny Turk was sitting up there just picking them off. But eventually the Australians made their way up. The Battle of the Lone Pine, I don't know if you've read that part, Battle of the Lone Pine, they climbed those cliffs. This is the First World War. And, and they defeated the Turks up there eventually. The reason they called it the Battle of Lone Pine because there was one lone pine tree up there. Okay. But you go 10 kilometers up the coast, it's all open land. Why did they pick this particular point to make a landing? See, there were so many mistakes, so many boo-boos made.
It's the same as before D-Day, when they went the first time, they lost so many guys.
Well, we're kind of getting out of time here, but do you have faith in God?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Secondly, how did combat change your perspective of life or death? I mean, you're a young kid, you go into combat and come out thinking differently about life and death, or?
Well, I thought about it, but I was anybody that said they weren't afraid, but once the battle started, then the adrenaline was there, and that seemed to disappear. It was at the time when you first go in any battle, going in. It's like in the jungles in New Guinea. I mean, in the desert you could see where your enemy were, but in the jungles you don't see them. He could be 2 or 3 yards dug in front of you with those there. So it's a matter of going in when you start, but once you get into the battle and you know that you're fighting for something, that seems to leave you. That's the way I used to feel.
I'm sure there's things that you saw and happened to you, you probably will never tell anybody, right? And we don't need to hear
Right.
that. I feel like there's a part of a combat veteran that's going to go to the grave. They're never going to tell anybody.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you try to forget this stuff, or do you just go on to other?
Well, I try to, but it's very hard to forget it.
So it obviously has changed your life.
It has changed my life. Changed my life, the way I think about things, and I don't know. It's
You just keep saying to yourself, it was in the past.
And
Yeah.
in our history, a lot of what I'm sharing in our schools, they're not getting in their textbooks. You know, your part of the story is valuable because we know about the Americans, the Germans, the Japanese, the British, and Canadians. Not a whole lot about the Australians.
the Australians played a big role in the Second World
Here's
War.
something you might be able to help me do. I went to Canada several years ago and I produced a film documentary up there because they kept feeling left out of history, overshadowed by the American victories. So I said, let's make a document. I've got it. It's my 7th film. It's,
Uh-huh.
Didn't hear too much about the Canadians in the war.
no, but I've got a great film. We should do the same thing with Australia. Listen to this real quickly. I had a trip booked to Australia 3-4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and the people that were going to bring me over, another funeral home like this, they decided not to do it. But maybe sometime we can talk about doing a film for Australia. Wouldn't that be great?
That'd be great.
We'll get in that later. I want to finish the interview here, but you're an American citizen.
Yes.
Tell me what the American flag means to you, Henry. Does it have a significance, special significance to you at all?
Yes. Well, it means freedom. And I guess if I was younger, I would probably, if there was a cause came up, I would do the same thing. I'd fight it.
And I think that whoever never was in the war does not have the same feelings as we do when we see the young guys fighting today and coming home with no legs and broken up. We feel it more than people that have never gone to war.
Of course. What does freedom mean to you? Tell me about freedom and the price for freedom.
Well, I think it's our duty to fight for freedom. I think it's everybody's duty to fight for freedom in some way. Especially today, the way we see the way the world is today, with terrorism. I mean, with terrorism, it's a different situation altogether because you don't know who your enemy are when you're looking at these people. At least, you know, during the war, when you're fighting at two armies fighting against one another, you know who your enemy is. So it's, you know, I learned a lot about the Arabic mentality while I was overseas. I spent 2.5 years in the Middle East. So I can understand their way of thinking where the average person does not know, because I have been amongst them. I'll give you an instance. The first instance, when we first landed in Suez, we were boarding a train because the train goes all the way from Israel all the way down to the Suez, and of course, and then you've got to cross over and get another train if you want to go to Cairo or Alexandria. But now I think you can go all the way. But I remember seeing British soldiers with pick handles. And the Arabs or the Egyptians were unloading, and if one guy was, you know, taking his time or not doing it, well, they'd come and whack him across the backside with a pick handle. And we'd say, hey, what are you doing? You know, hey, leave him alone. We didn't know. We didn't understand. But we soon found out.
Different mentality.
We soon found out when we settled in Palestine that you just don't turn your back on on these guys because I don't know. They're just one little sign of weakness and they've got you. You just.
Are you proud to be a World War II veteran?
I'm very proud. I'm very proud that I did, and I very proud of all my old mates too that were with me.
Tell me what Veterans Day here means to you. Is it
Veteran Day, I've already been invited by, you know, Rick Peterson.
I know the name.
He's
When we were in Australia, we used to go.
Anzac Day, or Anzac Day.
That's right.
Anzac Day was always a big day, and we'd always march with our battalion with all our medals up and everything. And Rick said to me, well, he asked me a few years ago, Henry, you know, he said he wanted me to come and join the officers club. I said, I'm not an officer. I said, I'm a non-com, but I'm not an official officer. So, but he said, I'd like, you know, how about if we march on Veterans Day? Well, every other Veterans Day up until now, we've been gone because we traveled overseas a lot. And
We had an orchard in Palisade, and we finished work in the orchard. We used to go on a trip always, so October and November.
And so this Veterans Day, I'm going to be here. So I talked to him the other night. I said, well, what do you think, Rick? I said, I'd like to march. He said, oh, Henry, he said, that'd be wonderful. He said, I said, well, is it appropriate if I march with my medals and if I carry an Australian flag, because I've got an Australian flag. Of course, Veterans Day is Armistice Day also. He said, by all means. He said, by all means. I don't know what you think about it.
It's wonderful.
So I'll be marching on Veterans Day with the Australian flag. I don't know if there's any other Australians here. If there was, I would invite them.
I'm just about out of time. Let me ask you this one question. If you could tell anybody about Australia's part in World War II, how important was it, and what would you tell somebody about it? Because we don't hear much about it. But how important was your involvement?
It would be very important. It would be very important. As a matter of fact, I gave a talk to a 7th grade class at, what school was it? Some school down there. I was invited to come down and talk to them. So I just briefly, and the kids were very, very interested. And you should have seen the letters I got back from them after. And they were saying, how about coming to the 8th grade next semester and talk to us? You know? So
tomorrow at the school, if we have time, I may have you share a few minutes with the kids. We'll see how much time we have, okay?
okay.
If you're up to it. I've asked a couple of the other veterans, but if we have a little more time, I may have you say hello to the kids or whatever.
Okay, that's fine, Larry.
There's so much more I'd like to ask you, but I need to get Rachel on. But at the end of my stories, if you watch any of my films, I've done 12 of them now, I always ask the veterans to salute into the camera. Could you do that for me from where you're seated when I tell you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Henry, look right into the camera. Go ahead and do a salute for me. Perfect, okay. Now I want you to stay there. I'm going to take a picture of me and you, and then we'll get Rachel on here, okay?
Okay.
So stay right where you're at there. Okay, can you see
I should have brought my Aussie hat.
Well, maybe you can bring it tomorrow to the
Tomorrow.
school. Can you bring it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not the Aussie hat, the cap I have that I wore at the honor flight.
Yes, bring it.
Okay.
When I count to 3, smile right in that camera, okay?
Okay.
1, 2, and 3. My new buddy Henry.
Great.
Let's get Rachel in here. Let me take this off of you. You can switch seats with her. We're doing good.